America was in deep crisis as well. Republican Herbert Hoover struggled ineffectively to quell the Great Depression. More than 20,000, possibly as many as 40,000, angry American veterans known as the Bonus Army descended on Washington, demanding war service bonuses not due to be paid until the year 1945.
I came to Washington to get my bonus, and I'm going to wait for it till I get it if I have to wait till 1945.
They set up a tent city on the Anacostia Flats in Washington. They brought their wives and children. They lived by military discipline with daily parade and a strict no-drinking rule. General Smedley Butler arrived to lend moral support.
I know who's made this country worth living in. It's just you fellas. Look, makes me so damn mad a whole lot of people speak of you as tramps. By God, they didn't speak of you as tramps in 1917 and 18. No. Take it from me. This is the greatest demonstration of Americanism we've ever had. Pure Americanism.
He was mobbed by veterans wanting to speak to him. Until late that morning, he sat with them in their tents, listening to their tales of lost jobs and families in distress and old battle wounds. After demonstrators clashed with district police, President Hoover ordered General Douglas MacArthur to restore order. Convinced that the Bonus Army was the vanguard of a communist coup, MacArthur, not for the only time in his storied career, disobeyed presidential orders and rousted the veterans with tanks, bayonets, and tear gas. MacArthur, whose aides included later Generals Dwight Eisenhower and George Patton, pursued the fleeing veterans across the river and set their makeshift city aflame. But when the Bonus Army marched again the next year into Washington, there was a new president in the White House who sent his wife, Eleanor, to help serve the veterans 3 hot meals a day with coffee. One veteran remarked, "Hoover sent the army, Roosevelt sent his wife." Several days later, the Bonus Army voted to disband. The new president put many of the veterans to work in the Civilian Conservation Corps. It was in his famous inaugural address in March 1933 that Franklin Delano Roosevelt rallied the nation with his declaration.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
It was the signature line of his extraordinary life. In truth, he was facing a disaster. Unemployment stood at 25%. The gross national product had fallen 50%. Farmers lost 60% of their income. Industrial production dropped over 50%. Between 1930 and 32, 20% of U.S. banks had failed. Bread lines formed in every town to feed the starving. Homeless walked the streets and slept in vast shanty towns known as Hoovervilles. There was no safety net to assist the desperate. Misery was everywhere. Roosevelt united Americans around a message of inclusion, the opposite of Hitler's.
The measure of the restoration lies in the extent to which we apply social values more noble than mere monetary profit.
In this vein, he called for strict supervision of all banking and credits and investments, and an end to speculation with other people's money. He proclaimed a New Deal, and although he could have nationalized the banks with hardly a word of protest, he chose a much more conservative course of action. He declared a 4-day national bank holiday, conferred with the nation's top bankers on his first full day in office, and signed the Emergency Banking Act, which was written largely by the bankers themselves. The banking system was essentially restored without radical change. And despite being accused of betraying his class, Roosevelt would ironically save capitalism from the capitalists themselves. Recognizing the failures of unfettered capitalism, Roosevelt unleashed the powers of the federal government. In his first 100 days in office, he passed legislation that established the Agricultural Adjustment Administration to save farming. the Civilian Conservation Corps to put young men to work in the forests and parks, the Federal Emergency Relief Administration to provide federal assistance to the states, the Public Works Administration to coordinate large-scale public works projects, the National Recovery Administration, NRA, to promote economic recovery. And he passed the Glass-Steagall Banking Act, which separated investment and commercial banking and instituted federal insurance of bank deposits. He also repealed prohibition and stated now would be a good time to have a beer. Roosevelt assembled a team of visionaries. Among them were Harry Hopkins, Roosevelt's chief aide, National Youth Administrator Aubrey Williams, Rexford Tugwell, Adolph Burl, and Secretary of the Interior Harold Ickes. There was also the formidable Frances Perkins, the U.S. Secretary of Labor and the first woman ever appointed to the cabinet. They became known as the New Dealers. Henry A. Wallace, the young Iowa geneticist, would become one of their leading lights. He was from a Republican farming clan that had worked the land since it was frontier. His father, Harry, had served Presidents Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge as Secretary of Agriculture. Roosevelt told Wallace to take whatever actions necessary to repair the nation's devastated rural sector. His solutions were controversial. To stop overproduction, he paid farmers to destroy 25% of the cotton crop that was in the ground. He also ordered the slaughter of 6 million baby pigs, although he made sure the Agriculture Department distributed much of the pork, lard, and soap to needy Americans. Condemned by critics, Wallace took to the radio to defend his program. He called it a declaration of interdependence.
The ungoverned push of rugged individualism perhaps had an economic justification in the days when we had all the West to surge upon and conquer. But this country has filled up now and grown up. There are no more Indians to fight. We must blaze new trails in the direction of a controlled economy, common sense, and social decency.
In the end, Wallace's plan worked brilliantly. Cotton prices doubled. Farm income jumped 65% from 1932 to 36. Corn, wheat, pig prices stabilized. And the farmers became Wallace's staunchest supporters. For a man who had spent years perfecting a strain of hybrid corn and who believed that abundant food supplies were essential for a peaceful world, Wallace was horrified by the unfortunate message such policies sent.
The plowing under of 10 million acres of cotton and the slaughter of 6 million little pigs in 1933 were not acts of idealism in any sane society. They were emergency acts made necessary by the almost insane lack of world statesmanship during the period from 1920 to 1932.
The public, which blamed business for causing the Depression, welcomed Roosevelt with great enthusiasm, hoping he could spark a recovery. But he was an enigma, campaigning at times as a big government liberal, spinning out one new government program after another, and at other times as a budget-balancing conservative. Some thought him a socialist in the Eugene Debs, Norman Thomas tradition. Others a fascist or corporatist, supporting the merger of state and corporate power. His industrial recovery program, the NRA, regulated production, competition, and minimum wage rates, some of which smacked of Italian fascism. In reality, Roosevelt was actually more pragmatic than ideological. Nonetheless, he was misunderstood by big business. Openly opposing Wall Street made for smart politics, but it won the everlasting enmity of conservative Republicans who attacked his inflationary policies as unconstitutional. Printing press money, they called it. And worse yet, FDR took the U.S. off the gold standard. He sacrificed foreign trade and its profits in order to stimulate domestic recovery. He also took steps to reduce the country's small 140,000-man army.
The plan as outlined to me was to form an organization of veterans
In 1934, retired General Smedley Butler re-entered the picture.